Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Along with all the dev server stuff that is going on, Gaijin has decided to also release the Moments of Valor for Canada. Now you may remember in the data mines a few days ago, basically they added just a bunch of Canadian skins, which is usually a sign that they're going to do a Moments of Valor for it. And here it is. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to have a look at what's in the video, talk about some of the models, talk about some of the kind of history behind it, and also talk about some of the kind of like things that they show, because I think it's important to do that. In a separate video, we'll talk about all the other stuff. There are some packs available for sale with some pretty good offers, actually, for the premium vehicles that are inside. They've added a ton of new camos to the game for Canada as well. They've also added in the NF5A pack for a pre-order. You can actually get a pretty cool skin from the Abbotsford Air Show demonstration, so that is really cool, and a few other things as well, such as some returning premiums. So there's just a bunch of stuff going on as usual, and all during the time of the dev server. So let's have a look at the vehicle. Let's talk about some of the things that they show, and if you haven't watched it, highly recommend it. It's on, of course, the YouTube channel for Gaijin and Warthunder, so make sure to get there. Has a really cool narrator, lovely sounds, lovely music, and all of that stuff. Really happy that they're continuing to do these little kind of moments of valor to showcase countries that usually you just don't see a lot of in game. And as time goes on, it is getting more and more likely that we'll see more of these people. Now, what's funny is just like just as a first part, I know, we can talk about like the references and everything like that, but for some reason, I don't know why they decided that this guy is going to wear very bright white sneakers. Maybe it's like an homage to something that I don't know, but it's just one of the funniest things that you kind of see, first of all. The other part of this is the graphics themselves. There's definitely some kind of like animations from like 5 to 10 years ago that kind of remind me of these, but everything just looks a little bit too kind of like washed out, a little bit too airbrushed. There's not a lot of like grittiness in this, if this makes sense. Imagine you're in the Second World War, right? And then, this is what it looks like. You look like you're in a Photoshop room. So who is this? This is Leo Major, who was a Canadian soldier during the Second World War. He also fought in Korea. So he was one of those that ended up playing, a part in both of the wars. One of the interesting things is this guy was actually born in America, but he was born to French-Canadian parents. So he ended up living in Canada, in Quebec, and he is very much a war hero when it comes to Canada in the Second World War and other areas. He's credited for some absolutely insane things that he did, whether it was capturing German vehicles, whether it was, being part of the Normandy beach landings, whether it was literally capturing areas single-handedly while he was on reconnaissance missions. This guy really is kind of like a true Canadian hero, and I'm sure there will be a million different videos about him. So yeah, his name is Leo Major. It's one of those things where with the eye patch and also with everything else kind of puts it all together, right? Like who this dude is. And then, yeah, kind of showing what he did, I believe in Zwolle, which was a Dutch town, which he technically liberated single-handedly, which is kind of nuts. So, funnily enough, in this one, they don't talk about the First World War for Canada, which I think would have been kind of cool, but also in War Thunder, we don't have a lot of First World War stuff, but there's a ton of really interesting stories about the First World War with Canadian troops too, so highly recommend looking into that stuff. I think it's pretty awesome. Basically, when it comes to the First World War, I feel like Canada just kind of gets a bad rap as, people who just came in and just annihilated everything that they came around. But if you actually have a look into the history of it, even though that is kind of true, the reason why a lot of these like Commonwealth forces acted like this during the First World War is usually one or two things. They were put in some of the worst places of the First World War, some of the most harrowing experiences, some of the most gritty fighting. They were just thrown in to be able to do with it. But also at the same time, there was a lot of stories of it happening to them first. So Canadian troops being heavily abused by German troops, especially after capture. So once these stories started going around, whether they were true or whether they were false, the Canadian troops did not care. They were not going to take any prisoners. They were going to basically just lash out and go crazy. And that's what they did. And they were incredibly effective at doing that as well. So it's definitely worth reading about and also kind of looking into. So yeah, this guy, good old Leo, nice to see the reference. And then we have the next reference, which is probably Juno, where the Canadians stormed the beaches, part of Operation Overlord, the invasion of France and the invasion of Normandy. A lot of people usually focus on America when it comes to the invasion of Normandy, but there were 5 different beaches. There was Omaha, there was Utah, Sword, Gold, and Juno. And you had not just America going in, but also you had all the Commonwealth forces, you had some French guys, you had some British guys, Australians, Canadians, pretty much everybody turning up to be able to help out France and liberate them from the Axis powers. So it's really cool to see an homage once again to it for Canada. I'm pretty sure they went up Juno Beach, and this is the Holy Roller, which came into it. It would have been nice if in this they had actually like painted this one in Canadian colors too, but unfortunately that isn't the case. And they also show the good old Churchill, which Canada uses. A lot of people talk about the fact that it would be cool to see like Canada in the game represented as kind of like a subtree or something like that. The problem with that, especially from a ground point of view, they do have some like unique vehicles. The Grizzly, which, you know, is a license-built Sherman, but also on top of that, you have the Rams, which were built from them, which we already kind of have in the game. And then you had stuff like the Sexton, for example, which is very similar to the Priest, and then also others. So they just have kind of vehicles that you can put all over the place. So I don't feel like a sub-ground tech tree would work. An air tech tree, I think, you know, there's definitely a chance of that happening. But you have the Churchill wandering in, and obviously doing a lot. You have the Spitfire going over too with a fantastic livery on it, a beautiful camouflage. And then you have a cool reference. So I haven't actually seen this movie, but we're on stream right now, but we were talking about it earlier. And people actually brought up that this was a reference from Greyhound, which is kind of surprising. So you have the ship throwing over the depth charges. And then, of course, you have the U-boat, which is underneath taking some damage. So we did actually have these U-boat tests last year. So not really too surprising to see these models in. The Warthunder mobile models also exist, which is kind of cool. But one of the things I have to mention is just remember, these types of videos are there to kind of like hype you and make you see some really cool stuff. They're not really there in terms of like trying to show you new content, which is why we've had some ridiculous things like the Vanguard submarine, which turned up in one of them. But we know that submarines are coming. They were confirmed in December by good old BVD that they were working on them. So we'll probably see quite a lot of U-boats in the future once they finish off dealing with the battleship. So really cool to see that. Really nice to see that too. A nice reference to the Korean War as well. They actually talk about a country being split up here, and also it's on the 38th parallel map. This is actually on the left-hand side of the map, and the 76mm Shermans, once again, with a wonderful camouflage on them. T-34 also getting blown up, showing once again that it's Korea. Korea is one of those wars that is really forgotten about, and it honestly is because you had the Second World War just before it, and when it comes to Korea, it really is more seen as kind of the the civil war in Korea itself, and then that was the first time where it was the whole like East versus West thing kind of taking off, you know, America versus Russia / China and all of this stuff. But unfortunately, in like popular media, everybody kind of focuses on the Second World War. It would be nice if there was a bit more love for Korea, and it's nice to see Gaijin actually do a bit of a nod to that. And also the fact that they're showing, you know, that the Canadians were involved in Korea, because once again, Korea is usually known as the American / China / Russia war. it's usually forgotten about that a lot of other nations were also involved in that too. A lovely Canada Sabre. There's actually some really nice Sabre skins coming in. And then also a CF-104, which is a Canadian well, starfighter. And this one, attached to it, is a big nuclear bomb. So you can have a bit of fun with that too. A beautiful camo, which is on this Sabre as well. Lovely to see. And then, of course, the CF-18, which is the staple for the Canadian Air Forces nowadays. It is the main vehicle that you'll see around the place. And then also a clipped wing Spitfire, I believe, or at least it... That looks so weird. It must be like the way that the vehicle is positioned, but it honestly looks like it's one side it's clipped wing and then the other side is just full. Like it's not clipped. That might just be my mind like playing tricks on me. But yeah, you have the CF-18. A lot of people want the CF-18 for the British tech tree. It would make sense. And since we're getting the Swiss Hornets in the game, we're getting the expansion of the Finnish ones and also the American ones with the new missile. Why not add the CF-18 too? You know, and add in some pretty cool camouflages for it. And then, of course, they have to do the little teaser, don't they? They have to. They can't stop themselves. Can't stop themselves in these videos being like, hey, want to look at cool shiny thing? Yeah, look at all the references, and hey, we're just going to stick in a Tu-95. One of the things that they do a lot in terms of this is they do this all the time. Okay, they just stick something in there to get people talk about. So let's talk about it. The Tu-95, which you can see back there, that's obviously a very large heavy bomber for the Russians. It's been in service for a long time. Some of them recently just got absolutely wrecked, but you know, it's in the video. And this is kind of like a homage to the fact that the good old Russians every so often just send one over Europe or send one over to Canada just to kind of do a little flight to tease and also probably do a little bit of reconnaissance and fact finding. And they always get intercepted by the vehicles that are around the place because obviously that's what you do when stuff invades your airspace. The model here, though, is not a Gaijin model. Does that make sense? This looks like one that they bought, like an asset that's designed for a game, because look how low poly it is compared to the Hornet. And I get that it's like slightly far away. What they really need to do with these shots, if they want to make them a bit more believable, they need to blur the background a little bit. So keep the CF-18 in the foreground and then just blur the background so you only see kind of like the shimmer of it, because my God, it looks bad. Like when you actually pause the video and look at it, you can definitely tell it's nowhere near close to what, you know, Gaijin would accept for a model. So yeah, Tu-95, nice to see it, but it's not going to come to the game anytime soon. At least that one isn't. I'm sure if they're working on another model, maybe, but definitely not that one. And then you have, you know, Desert Storm, I'm pretty sure, where you have the French forces, the American forces, the Canadian forces, and then the Qatari forces in the form of the Alpha Jet and also the Mirage. So that's really cool to see. The good old Arrow going forward, and then maybe some cool Qatari skins that we can see. Leopard 2A4M coming in as well, with a nice desert skin, finding out why it has this additional armor on the side. Maybe we'll get playable infantry, guys. You remember when everybody believed that was happening in the 1st of April, and, you know, basically 1 million people ended up watching that video, and everyone was like, oh my God, look, playable infantry is coming. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. No, it's not. No, it's not. It might come now because Gaijin saw the response to that and, you know, saw that there was a lot of people like, ooh, you know, wouldn't that be really cool to see? Maybe they'll do like a one-off event with it. Or maybe people could just go play Enlisted, you know, or maybe they could go play that new game that they're working on that I can't remember the name. But yeah, so here's a guy just hammering the side of the Leopard. Obviously, it didn't care because of its protection. Turns, and then kaboom. There's the C2A1. It appeared out of nowhere with a beautiful skin. The C2A1 skins are quite nice in the game. Very simple, but also kind of show the C2A1 in how it was set up, especially in Afghanistan. So it's really cool to see that. And now this one is kind of funny. So right here, you may be wondering, why are they showing a Hornet. Why are they showing a Hornet firing a Sparrow at a boat? Why would they do that? Doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? It's just kind of an odd thing. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from the Aviation Geek Club website about this, because I was like, why are they showing this? This doesn't make a lot of sense. So basically, this is from Operation Desert Storm, and this actually happened. So the Canadians were involved. They had their CF-18s there. They'd had basically 2 weeks of kind of not really doing a lot. And so what ended up happening with Captain Steve Hillbilly Hill and also Major Dave D.W. Kendall, they didn't hesitate to accept their shipborne controller's unexpected request, which was, would you like to strafe a boat? The boat in question had escaped an A6 attack when the American intruder ran out of ordnance, and after receiving final clearance to engage from the controller, the two Canadian pilots emptied their 20mm cannons over multiple strafing runs. With only air-to-air missiles remaining, they attempted to acquire an infrared lock to fire an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile. The boat's heat signature was too low, and after some trouble, Hillbilly acquired a radar lock and fired an AIM-7 Sparrow semi-active radar homing missile at the boat. The missile impacted the water short of the target, at which time both pilots returned to base. The boat was eventually finished off by US bombers, but the Canadians were officially awarded an assist for its seaworthiness kill. Hill and Kendall were extolled by senior military officials at home for their example of Canadian can-do. However, the Canadian Air Task Group Middle East Commander, Colonel Romeo Lalonde, conveyed to the press in theater a different opinion, asserting they should have made less passes to minimize their exposure. He was not entirely happy about the attack. They had, after all, wasted a $250,000 air-to-air missile on a boat in the first offensive action by the Canadian military since the Korean War. The engagement was admittedly unorthodox, but Lalonde's criticisms were viewed to be very harsh by most officers in the fighter community. However, after the attack, one Canadian officer said, "We're relieved to finally see some action. Soldiers don't really like to fight, but if everybody else is doing it, you naturally want to participate." So this happened during Operation Desert Storm, where some Canadian Hornets tried to light up a boat with their guns, couldn't finish it off, so one of them ended up getting a radar lock on it and fired a missile at it, which is fantastic. No, he didn't hit it. The missile missed, which is why in the trailer, or in this, I should say, it also misses, since it's a homage. So it's just kind of funny when that happens. So the rest of it is just showing some camouflages of good old Canada. You know, nice to see some good stuff. There's a little kind of thing here which always annoys me, especially when it comes to drag bombs. Like, look at the release of like this one. It happens with like the other ones too, but it's just very obvious on this one. If you're angling down and when you like fire it, the bomb actually goes upwards before it goes down, and it just makes it look rubbish. I wish it didn't, but yeah, have a look at this one here. So this is it attached, and then it lets go, and it goes instantly upwards, and then it falls down, right? I just wish it didn't do that in War Thunder, but it does. So what can you say? So this video is really fun. There's a lot of really cool references in this one. You know, once again, just really nice to see Canada represented in the game, especially for Armed Forces Day. Since nowadays, when it comes to War Thunder, we actually have quite a lot of Canadian vehicles. And the only real question when it comes to War Thunder is the future of Canada. Does it become a subtree? Does it become an independent one? Or do they keep putting all of the vehicles all over the place, which is what they've done more recently? I think that's probably more what will happen, but who knows? Maybe with stuff like this, we'll see some better interest. Make sure to check out the packs. I'll cover them in a video later for you, so you can also see them too. Look after yourselves. Peace be with you. I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman,
Warthunder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.